What do you do when you've made $1 billion and changed the way that almost everyone uses the internet? Today on the Jordan Harbinger Show, founder of Instagram, Kevin Systrom, on taking feedback and creating a tech unicorn. Here we go. How does one start a startup? Do you start from a place of, look, I want to found a company, or are you like, I want to solve this for a specific issue?
I think, okay, first off, I think I did it in a way that most people don't, which is I'm not sure I tried to found a startup.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to work on my own stuff.
Like not have a boss?
Yeah, I mean, that's a different way of putting it. But in fact, I think I've said that before. I was like, I just didn't want a boss. I'd been working at some great companies for some great people for a while, but I wanted the chance to build something from scratch, quote unquote, my way,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the reason why I decided I was going to jump ship from the startup that I was at to go start something. So, I didn't know it was going to be a startup. It was just me. I was futzing around with ideas. But that was my way. In terms of how you start a startup, meaning just anyone, I mean, nowadays probably very different. I mean, you can raise money fairly quickly. There are all sorts of incubators that people are part of.
Yeah.
That's not the route I went. I just kind of went I just need space, a table, and my old laptop, and a few ideas. It took more than a few to get to Instagram, but
Yeah.
but that was the way I did it back then.
I'll go over some before we do the show. I'll do like a little. He started this app.
Yeah.
That was like the 10 billionth check-in app of the
Right,
decade
yeah,
or of
yeah.
the year or whatever.
I think we were before 10 billion, but
Okay.
yeah, I just
So top million.
I think we were definitely in the first 100. Let's
Okay,
put it, give
yeah.
me some credit.
Yeah, I'm giving. Yeah, it's just funny because when you look at check-in apps now, you're
Yeah.
like, wait, do we still do that? And we kind of do. We just don't use a check-in app. It just Instagram or whatever you're using happens to sort of know where you are.
It's true. At the same time, of all the crazy ideas that I have, in my oodles of time now, I think to myself, man, it just feels like check-in apps had so much velocity
Mm-hmm.
and then just nothing. And I guess Instagram kind of took that space because you could see what people were up to, et cetera. But sharing a photo is a lot more heavyweight than just sharing where you are.
Yeah.
And I still feel like there's room for sharing your location. I feel like, Find My Friends kind of does it, but not really. And
Not
people
really.
have hacked it. And
Yeah.
But my point is there's something there, and I'm not sure who's going to do it. But if you know anyone, I also invest these days. So.
I was thinking about this the other day because when I was reading about your history, I thought, oh yeah, now we use, oh wait, I have no way to know if hey, are you going to this event? Other than texting everybody who might be going to a specific conference in Vegas, I have to look on some sort of thing. But I also don't want anybody to be able to see that I'm there.
Right.
I just want to see if my friends are there. So there's a permissions thing that nobody's quite figured out. And then apps like LinkedIn kind of do it, but it's oh, but you have to be available all the time and the app has to be open. I'm like, no one's going to do that. It's got to be built into the OS almost.
Yeah. So my point really is that we started in a crowded space. Then it's everyone left the room, and it's not clear to me that's an invaluable room.
Mm-hmm.
Is invaluable a word? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My point is, I think it might be valuable, and no one's there anymore. Really.
Yeah. It's nobody's quite solved the privacy issue and made it useful. Yeah. There's sort of
I hope in startups that someday there will be this moment where retro is cool again. Where people are we don't have an app, we're just on the web.
Yeah, we're HTML5.
Yeah, I just feel like there's this retro movement that might happen. I'm kidding.
I don't know. I mean, it would be I think
check-in apps are the new hot thing. Badges and gamification come back.
That's right. Well, I wonder, do you ever wonder, actually, let me phrase it as a question. Do you ever wonder, hey, people are going to want to get rid of some of these filters after 20 years. They're going to want to see what their actual skin color was, not the sepia.
Oh, you mean on their photos, be able to undo it?
Yeah, delete Instagram, remove Instagramfilter.com could be the hottest website of 2035.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to be the one that creates it, but no. If someone enterprising out there wants to figure it out,
why not?
Give them the formulas, they can back it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you'd get a lot of press if you were the guy to invent that, I think. Your mom said something along the lines of when you started your startup, your mom said, like, "What about health insurance?"
Yeah,
And it's kind of a joke when you tell that story, but what people don't realize is that, like, half of a business is, "Wait, but what about health insurance? Wait, is
yeah,
the who paid the electric bill? How
yeah.
come the internet's not working?" How did you manage that in the beginning? Because I know in the beginning, you're like, "I have my old laptop, and I'm just pushing out code," and it's yeah, but who's, like, doing payroll?
Well, first off, I think it's important, like when you start a company, to find as much leverage as you can so
Mhm.
that you don't have to figure a lot of this stuff out. What's crazy is now, if you start a startup, there are it's like a meta startups. There are startups that have been formed to like help you with all this stuff as a startup. So, whether it's, credit cards. I remember trying to open an Amex and they wouldn't give us an Amex because we hadn't been in business long enough and
Yeah.
we didn't have profit and blah, blah, blah. So we were bankrolling everything on our own credit cards and then paying ourselves back, and it was messy. And we hired a rent a CFO, which actually exists out there,
Wow.
via all these different these firms you can go to. It's a mess. But what I'll say is that stuff is table stakes. And the good news is it's getting easier, right? Like before Instagram, you actually had to have like hardware for your servers. I remember
Oh,
I
yeah,
worked at
sure.
Odeo, that became Twitter. And I remember visiting our data center, and it's somewhere actually around this recording studio, somewhere around here. And we walked in and we had to have like headphones on. It was loud. And
It was that loud?
yeah, yeah. I mean, a
Wow.
lot of computers running and they were old school, right? Running on diesel or something. It's,
Yeah, like, how
um,
loud is it when you need
but,
headphones?
but, uh, but now with AWS, it's like you don't even think about it. So my point is starting a startup has just become so lightweight. And I like that because it means the true competitive advantage is basically on two things. One, the value of the idea, and two, the execution. And that has meant it's become extremely competitive because if there were 100 check-in apps when we started, today, if that was still a space that people cared about, there would be, you were joking, a
Yeah,
million, but there would
10,000.
be a million.
Yeah.
It's funny, I started doing some angel investing and I would come across a company and I'd be like, that's an awesome idea. And, my friend who's an investor was like, okay, but rule number one is go find the other 10 that are doing the exact same thing and compare them all. Because as much as you think that's a cool idea, there are a lot, and then compare the execution.
That's
But my
wise.
point is, it's totally different to start a company today. And on the health insurance stuff, it is so important to make sure you're taken care of. I think we just got really lucky.
Yeah.
This could have ended in a bunch of different ways. Um, but I was like, I mean, listen, I was 26, I guess, when I
Yeah.
started. I'm 36 now. It's 10 years later. I didn't have a kid then. I didn't have
Right.
anything to worry about. My co-founder and I, Mike, like to say, like, we think there's a reason why startups are started by like 20-year-olds. Because
Yeah.
like you can go hard to 4 a.m. every single day, or maybe even longer.
Yeah.
You don't get sick. It just works. You don't really have kids, and that's part of the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship is that you can make a lot happen with a few people, highly leveraged, and if you stay healthy,
Yeah.
everything goes well. But
Yeah,
we
there
probably
was
took some risks we shouldn't have.
I agree, but I totally get it. I mean, it's just I went to law school and it was very similar. Startups are even more hardcore, but there were guys in law school that were married and we were like, "Hey, you want to go out tonight?" And he's like, "No, I've got to go and spend some time with my family." And we're like, "Oh my God, you've had a family this whole time?
Yeah.
How is that possible?" And we felt bad for them. Not that they had to go spend time with their family, but we're like, "Does your kid even know who you are? We've been studying for the bar exam. Like, you haven't left the library for 4 weeks more."
Well, now it's interesting because I have a lot more time. I mean, I keep myself busy with a lot of, quote unquote work. And when I say quote unquote work, it's not like I go to an office, but I have lots of things going on. But I get to see my family. And I've got 2 kids now. And I often think to myself, man, I don't see them enough. And then I think to myself, wait, like if I was working day to day,
Oh
like in an
yeah.
office and I was commuting an hour, so I have to remember to like how grateful I am to have this experience now to be a little bit more flexible. But man, how life changes.
Ugh, yeah. Having my first kid, I'm like, oh, this is what people mean when they say your priorities change.
Yeah, totally.
And I just happen to be lucky that I'm in a good place where my priorities can change, and I'm not like, guess I better go get a job at the post office. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but a lot of people have to kind of give up on what they like doing when they have kids and family because it's like reality check. You're not paying your bills with whatever you were doing before, and a lot of people that kind of sneaks up on them, and it's
Trade-offs
uncomfortable.
are real.
You are really well known for keeping things simple, and it looks like the original app Bourbon was like this check-in app and it involved photo sharing,
Mhm.
and you managed to pare things down. Like, all right, this is one of the most popular things people are doing on the app. I assume there was a process to prune away all this, or were you just looking at the data and you're like, everyone's sharing photos. Let's just double down on this.
No, in fact, I guess a couple ways of telling this story, but the most interesting way is just to say when we told people that we're currently using Bourbon, there were maybe 100 of them, that we were going to be switching to Instagram. 99 complained, right? And there was only one that was like, like this Instagram thing seems a little bit cooler than Bourbon. Everyone loved Bourbon. It was great. And in fact, the data didn't show that everyone was just sharing photos. In fact, they were checking in far more than they were sharing photos. So we actually had data, and this is why business is so hard. We had data that showed that we shouldn't work on Instagram, that we should just keep working on Bourbon. And who knows? I mean, we don't have the counterfactual. Like maybe we should have kept working on Bourbon. Maybe it would be even bigger today. Like we don't know.
Burbogram.
But we decided that Bourbon didn't have the competitive edge because there were so many check-in apps that just having a feature different wasn't going to work. We needed something that people were drawn to because the real test is when you give Bourbon to someone who isn't one of your close friends or one of their close friends, do they retain? And the answer was no, time and time again, because everyone was like, I use Foursquare or Gowalla or Hot Potato or, like
Yeah.
you name it, right?
I forgot about those.
But Instagram, the process was we took a look and we said, okay, what do we think are the most unique features? And I don't remember the third one, but I remember number 2 was plans. Plans were like check-ins, but in the future. So you could say, hey, we're going to go hang out on Thursday. Let's make a plan. And then that broadcast in advance. So instead of checking in on Thursday, by the way, you checked in then as well, but you would broadcast and then people could join. And it created this really interesting snowball effect where people would say, hey, I'm going to do this thing, and people could join in. And before you knew it, on Thursday, you'd show up and like 20 of your friends would be there.
That's cool.
It was a really nice organic way. So people love that. And I still think there's an opportunity there that hasn't been tapped.
There is. We use texting, and it's a huge pain. Hey, are you
Right.
coming? Oh, bro, sorry. I didn't see this till just now. We know you're lying.
Yeah, but we had gamification too. Like just to go deeper on this, we had this thing where like if you made plans and you didn't follow through and check in, you lost points. But if you made a plan and you checked in within an hour of the window you said you were going to, you actually got like double points or something. I
You
can't
get like
remember.
a little reliability badge.
Something like, well, you just earned points. And then there was this leaderboard of like who could make the most number of plans and actually follow through. And it was an incentive system basically to be more social. And people liked that. But we didn't feel that that was like a truly big enough market to go after with our startup effort. So the photo part was interesting because it was the part people were most emotional about. They were like, oh, it's so great that you can do this. And the fact that you could do it meant that you could share what you were up to, who you were with, often what you were eating, right? Like that kind of stuff. And that made us just double click on that idea because it was so differentiated from what existed at the time. That's how we pared it down.
That's surprisingly kind of insightful because a lot of people probably think you just stumbled upon this cool photo sharing idea because you love photography. Like
I
that's
do,
one of
yeah.
So, and there's this metaphor of like, well, maybe it's not quite a metaphor, maybe it's the real story. But I went to Florence and I went on this photography thing and I had my great camera, and then this professor was like, "No, here's this crappy camera. Keep it simple." And you're like, "Ding, ... Instagram is simple."
Yeah. I would love. I'm a huge nerd when it comes to statistics, and I think like one of the classic sayings is correlation is not causation, right? It's very easy to look back and overfit the past, and like perhaps I do that in some of my narratives, but I don't know. I think a different way of looking at this is that maybe better companies would come out of people if they just stuck to what they knew and loved, right? And stopped futzing around with things that they thought would quote unquote make a good startup. And you see it time and time again. The people who found the largest things are often most passionate about those problems and most familiar with them. So, I often like to say, like in high school, if there was a crystal ball and they said, someday you're going to found a computer-based, company, because I loved computers and I love programming. and mobile phones weren't really a thing back then. Like you played Snake on a Nokia, that was the
Sure.
level. But like, you know, it's going to be advanced, and you're going to be able to take photos with it and share them with friends, and you'll be able to manipulate them with color. Like that was all the stuff I was into in high school. It just came full circle when I let it. Like because that's what we knew. If we had tried to focus on something that we hadn't done in the past, I think it would have been a lot harder.
You're right. A lot of people will try and look at data and be like, the perfect idea is this random thing, dot, dot, dot on the blockchain,
And
right?
some people do, by the way,
Sure.
and they do okay at it. If you're gonna, like we said, like spend 24 hours a day on something,
Yeah.
I hope you love it, because it takes away years off your life to get there,
Yeah.
you know?
It
At least it did in my case. I don't know. Maybe other people had an easier time.
Maybe. When I worked in finance a long time ago, I was always jealous of the people that seemed to really enjoy it. They'd be like, and then we securitize these batches of subprime mortgage. And I'm just like, I'm so jealous that you don't want to jump out the window right now. Like, you
Yeah.
really enjoy this. But everybody else that was there was like, the data shows that I'm going to get rich working at Goldman Sachs. Period.
Interesting.
The end.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, we know the stats on how much people are miserable at those types of banks and law firms and things like that. So,
Well, I like every step of the way, I just made like non-financial decision after non-financial decision in a highly financial area. So that's not to say that like when I joined Google, I wasn't paid well, or that it wasn't one of the top 1% of companies in terms of payroll, right? Like, but I took a lower paying job than I would have had I joined other companies. Like I had other offers that were far more lucrative, but I joined Google because I was like, this company is the world changing. I mean, it is going to be one of the companies that goes down in history as one of the most important companies on earth ever. Like to be part of that, even for a moment, is super special. I always made decisions that way. Like, what's my passion, or what do I love? And now I think about it, and I'm like, man, that was kind of irrational. Like,
Yeah.
but like it worked out. So
Yeah.
my point is to anyone listening, if you decide to go that direction and that's the way you want to make a decision, have the faith that because you're so passionate about the stuff you're working on, good things will come of it. I think it's much harder to get into a situation where there's like high pay and no passion and good things happen. That's where burnout happens. That's all sorts of bad stuff happens.
That's true.
Yeah.
As long as you can pay your bills, I suppose, then it's all good.
Well, okay, we talked about kids a little bit. I often think about like how I will paint the picture of options for my kids. And I wish someone had told me earlier that you can choose. I mean, my parents let me choose whatever I want. I hope I let my kids choose whatever they want. Not everyone has that freedom in their family, but like, let's assume that for a second. It's important to know you could choose whatever you want, but everything comes with consequences. Not consequences is like a loaded word. Maybe outcomes is better. But like, if you choose you want to be, a painter, like, okay, great. Go look at that distribution of outcomes. It's like, if you're okay with that and happy with those outcomes, then that's great, because maybe you value creativity and maybe you want to work in a big workspace and you realize that only 1% of 1% of 1% of people ever even get to put their stuff in a gallery, or, I mean, I'm stretching this a little bit because I'm not super familiar with the art world.
Yeah, same.
But my point is, it's not unknown when you set off to make a decision what the likely distribution of outcomes are, right? So it's good to at least ask yourself, hey, let's imagine I can fast forward the tape 10 years from now. Where am I going to be? What are the likely outcomes? What's like the most extreme outcome? I feel like I experienced an extreme outcome, right?
Yeah.
Not everyone who starts a startup, right? But I don't know. The way I think about it is, if I did that exercise, I'd say, well, I'd learn a lot. I'd have a ton of fun. I'd work with a small group of people. I'd get to build something, and I'd probably learn enough to like get a great job somewhere else and then maybe get back into it later. And that median case doesn't feel so bad to me. But on the upside, you could potentially start something that changes the world. And don't get me wrong, when we started Instagram, like there was zero belief we were going to get even close to that. A lot of people like to say like, "Oh, I knew it at the beginning. We were going to." Not even close.
That always sounds funny to me. Like,
but
you knew it, huh? That's congratulations.
Yeah. But my point is knowing the distribution of outcomes before you make a decision, and just stopping and saying like, what could possibly happen? What's the range? And am I okay with that? And if you're okay with that, then go for it,
I suppose as long as you're not delusional about your chances of rolling the dice properly in that,
Exactly.
right? Like if you think, okay, the chances of me making it big as an artist really, really, really slim, as opposed to, no, but I'm really good. I'm totally going to be the next Warhol and I'm going to be hanging out with celebrities all the time. It's like, then you're setting yourself up for a failure. But if you think I might make a modest salary owning this company that turns into an app and maybe we'll sell it later on, which would be great, that's more reasonable.
Yeah.
And the
So
idea that maybe
I'm
you'll
going to
never
get
do that.
super nerdy,
Please.
even beyond where we just went with
Sure.
this. Okay. So like what I talked about in terms of distribution is called a prior in statistics. It's like, what is your prior belief of the outcomes of what you can possibly experience if you make this decision, right? But you can go ahead and update that prior. Now we're getting into what's called Bayesian statistics.
Mm-hmm.
People can Google it, right? All the statisticians are rolling their eyes right now. But Bayesian statistics is the idea that you can update your prior beliefs with new information. So if you said, well, I happen to be the son of like a super famous artist, I don't know, actually that like increases your
Yeah.
outcomes quite a bit. There are lots of examples of that in art and movies and right and music. In startups, I don't know if you worked at Google or Microsoft or Amazon or one of the big ones, if you have a computer science degree, if all your co-founders also worked at one of those and have a computer science degree from MIT or Stanford or Harvard, like, I don't know, like I'd probably invest, right?
Yeah.
So my point is you can update your beliefs over time using information. And I agree, it's important not to be delusional. But I don't know. Listen, anyone who gets into startups is a little bit delusional.
I think
Have
that's
to be.
probably, yeah, you're probably right. Because
Yeah.
it's like one
You're
of the
talking
least,
to one.
it's like one of the least safe sort of paths that you can have for the qualifications that most people have. Like, oh, I could take this job at McKinsey or Google or wherever. Nah, I kind of want to just eat Kind bars for the next like 3 years and drink Mountain Dew every day until I pass out. And like, then, but you have,
Kind bars are fancy.
they
I
are,
know,
you're right. It's
yeah.
probably not even that fancy. It's
We had those granola we lived off of Nature's.
Yeah, the one where there's 2 flat ones in a pack.
And they crumble
Yeah.
everywhere.
I just had one this morning.
What are the names of those?
Nature, it's like
Is it
Nature's
Own
Choice
those?
or
Nature's
Own.
Choice, yeah.
And they're green. The green.
I swear this isn't an ad, but
No.
those are delicious.
They are. I
And
just
I
had one.
lived off of them.
We have them in the lobby here. We'll get them for you when you leave.
I'm going to show up at home and there's going to be a truck waiting with like Nature's Valley.
Nature
Listen,
Valley.
Nature's
That's right.
Valley.
That's right. It
Yeah,
came
we
to
got to
me.
get the sponsor correct. Okay, I'm
That's
sorry.
right. naturevalley.org/Jordan.
Hard cut.
Yeah. Most successful things are pivots. I think you said this in another talk that you gave. YouTube was like a dating site. I think, what was the other example that Tim Ferriss gave me? Post-its were like a failed adhesive product and turned into a note.
I mean, Facebook was different at the beginning. YouTube was different. Yeah, I think PayPal was also different, right? Most great ideas
Yeah.
start as something else. And there was a professor at Stanford who wrote a book called like something Getting to Plan B or something. I can't remember exactly. His name is Randy Komisar, but you can look up the book.
We'll put it in the show
yeah,
notes.
thank you.
We'll find it.
But it's effectively the idea that like, oh, now I'm quoting a book that was many, many years ago. But the idea is that rarely does your plan A work out. So you have to be able to be quick to move to where the fire starts.
Mhm.
And often the best business ideas, I believe, are getting yourself into an area, putting down a bunch of kindling, and really hoping that lightning strikes somewhere. And when it strikes and it starts a fire, you run over and you pile all the rest of the kindling on that thing. You don't sit over hoping that lightning strikes somewhere else because you want it to. You can't will lightning, is what I'm saying. So anyway, most ideas
that's
start
wise.
as separate things and they morph over time. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to go to the Wayback Machine. Yelp actually was different too. It was like you emailed out to a bunch of people asking for recommendations, and then that turned into the directory.
Oh, wow.
YouTube was a dating site. It's crazy.
That's wild to think about now.
But you can go back and you can actually see in the Wayback Machine like what it looked like way back in the day, and it's striking actually.
The homepage for Amazon is the one that always comes to mind, where it was like the crappiest.
Yeah.
Had like a little digital picture of a river, and it was like over 100,000 books or something like that. It was
Still
like
sounds like a lot of books. to
it's a
me.
lot of
Yeah.
books. Yeah, Bezos had a really full garage at that point. But it's like now, it's just looking back at that 1998 version, you're like, wow, that was like about 20 plus. I mean, there are kids that like can't rent cars that were born then,
Yeah,
and now it's one of the largest
totally.
businesses around. You've talked about always trying to prove yourself wrong, and without truth, you cannot improve. How do you get feedback when you're the boss, or when maybe you're not even the boss? You're just trying to get honest feedback from people. It's got to be
Yeah.
really tough.
Um, well, you asked a question with two layers. One,
I
how do
did.
you get honest feedback? And
Hmm.
then two, when you're the boss.
Right.
Let me put aside the when you're the boss thing because most people aren't the boss. And
True.
honestly, like it's a special case of how do you get honest feedback anyway?
Hmm.
It's just along the dimension of your authority. The higher your authority, the harder it is to get honest feedback. But I think in general, it's really hard to get feedback no matter who you are. Okay, so we're sitting there, we're having dinner, we're at this nice restaurant, and you're like, God, this steak sucks. And I'm like, yeah, mine's not that good either. Waitress walks up or the waiter and says, how's your meal? And we're both like, great, thanks.
Loving it
Loving it. Awesome, thanks. Just leave us alone.
every day of my
And
life.
and he or she walks away. How many times has that happened to you?
Yeah, I mean, I always do that. I
Always, right?
rarely would I complain about the food unless
Yeah.
it's like this is not cooked.
But by the way, like you just said a really interesting thing here, which is one, like feedback is seen as like complaining
Hmm.
about something or someone. And you don't want to be that guy or that person doesn't want to be that girl. Like you feel like the social pressure not to. But you know, it's funny, like now that I've invested in a couple restaurants and I see that the lack of feedback leads to bad outcomes. I'm like, if something's wrong, I'll say, hey, like, I just want you to know because, and this is my line. I say, if I were you and if I were working here, I'd really want someone to tell me about this
Yeah.
because I feel like probably no one's going to say anything, but hey, listen, this is just for you. And it's like my thing was totally overcooked. Like I enjoyed it still, but it was totally overcooked. And maybe I shouldn't say I totally enjoyed it, but my point is, um, I think you have to go out of your way to see feedback as helping someone
Hmm.
rather than complaining or criticizing. So that's not answering your question about how to get feedback. That's answering how to give it. But I guess it starts with
It
giving.
makes sense. I mean, as a business owner, you're well, you're a business owner of many businesses now, but as a business owner now, I go in there and if something goes wrong, I'll go, "Hey, look, I don't mean I love this place, but
Yeah,
this is not a good fit, or this doesn't work,
yeah.
or this person probably shouldn't be in this position."
What's really
Where
interesting though is sometimes I give the feedback in the way I just described, and the reaction is really negative. And I'm
really,
like, man, I like.
yikes.
Well, I think to myself, I'm like, that's like a failed opportunity to like for that person to learn about something
Sure.
really important and like there was this one restaurant and like every single Yelp review mentioned the word salty. And like I thought this thing was too salty too. So I tried my best to be like, hey, like FYI, I think this. And also if you look, you'll see it says it over and over again. And I don't think the reaction was terrible, but it's just like people sometimes bristle. And I wish I could find a way to be like, man, if I were in your shoes, I would really want to know this because then I could make it better. So let's now flip this to how do you get feedback?
Hmm.
I think you have to actively ask for it. The idea that people are just going to offer it up to you is rare. And then actively asking for it, like I love to cook. We were just talking about food, but let's do another food example. I cooked a Thanksgiving dinner and I made this like really special turkey thing, these amazing potatoes where you like slice on a mandolin and you line them all up. It looks really pretty
Wow.
and it was intense. I worked really hard and everyone knew it. But we sat down and we ate, and I'm thinking in my head, oh, interesting. That thing sucks. That's undercooked, but that's good. And then I asked the table, I said, hey guys, what do you think about the food? And everyone's like, oh, so good. It's great. And I was like, I disagree. Like, I think there are some things that need help. Like, what do you guys think? And I asked like 3 or 4 times. People would not give it to me. They wouldn't. And I knew, like, for instance, the bread hadn't cooked all the way. So it was kind of weird in the
Oh
middle, right? Like,
no,
but no
that's
one
bad.
said anything. But my point is, like, even in family, even when you're asking for it. So then I said, okay, this is the fun part. Rate everything from your favorite to your least favorite. So of the 4 main dishes, you got to give me what's your top, and then rank it down to the bottom. Then they don't have a choice. They have to rank something on the bottom, right? So one of the ways, I guess, of giving feedback is like, hey, like, what are my top 3 things that you think I'm good at? What are the 3 things you think I should work on the most? That's like force ranking potentially. Um, but even still, I think it's really hard. Maybe the last thing I'll say on this is if you say to someone, hey, I'm really trying to improve. Like in this case, imagine I said, I'm really trying to improve as a chef. And I know not everything's perfect. So I really want to know from your eyes what stuff was the best and what stuff wasn't the best. And maybe that disarms it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Because
my father-in-law said the best thing. He goes, the butter wasn't salted. And I said, okay, listen, if that's the worst thing,
yeah,
I can buy different butter next time.
right. Good point.
But still, even that was like easy feedback to give because it wasn't my
Sure.
thing. People find it really hard.
They do because they're not thinking, all right, this is going to be helpful for you. They're thinking he spent like 7 hours
Totally.
cooking all this. I'm not
Totally.
going to sit here and be like showing up with a deck of cards for later and be like, this is too overcooked. This is
Now
dry.
imagine a presentation or a product that you slaved away on for a month.
Yeah.
So again, I think the best thing to do is just say, I really want to improve, and the only way I'm going to improve is if you let me know what stinks about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think people would be more open to giving you feedback if that were the case.
I sometimes pull the old, if you had to pick something, even if that something was still kind of good, but it was the worst thing in your mind, what would that be? And you find like half the table agrees. And then you know that that thing sucks.
Yeah, the other way of doing it, at least in food, is just look at what's the least eaten.
Yeah, you kind of have a real-time report card.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. I didn't think about that.
Yep.
That totally makes sense. How do you know who to listen to, right? Because I would imagine people are like, oh, photo sharing? We don't need any more of that. But then on the other hand, so you can't listen to them, but then you also do have to listen to some people because they have good ideas. So how are you parsing, okay, this is good feedback that makes sense versus that's just a person who doesn't understand what we're doing?
Yeah, I think often people lump people into overall believability buckets, meaning, wow, this person started a startup. They're so smart. Like, I got to listen to everything they say.
Right.
I think that's a mistake. Instead, I think people have different dimensions. So listen, if you're really, really good at, I don't know, producing podcasts and you've done one after another and like just all of them have been hits, of course I'm going to believe you about podcasting or frankly, like audio equipment or studio equipment. Like of course, you're going to be my first call, right? But I don't know, let's say I have a headache.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to diagnose, why do I get this? I'm not going to call you because, frankly, just because you're good at this thing doesn't mean
I
you're
would
good at
make
that.
your headache a lot worse.
Right. But my point is, I think people have dimensions of expertise.
Sure.
And I think the idea is you have to seek out people who aren't just impressive, but rather are impressive on that specific thing. So when we were designing the new logo for Instagram, we had very specific people we talked to about branding and iconography. And we researched the masters of this world who had created logos before for all the major companies that had lived on forever. And we did that research on those, but we didn't go to the company, hey, vote, right? Like we didn't just say, hey, everybody, vote for your, right? Because that's a free-for-all. That's not going to give you, I wish someone would write the opposite of the wisdom of the crowds book. It's like, because it's so clear to me that you need to find people who are good at that thing and just go deep with them and don't overgeneralize. But the number of people that told me photo sharing was a terrible business to get into, it's like not a million, but it's
several.
They're up there.
Many.
But maybe definitely last thing on this is, in order to be great, I think you have to be contrarian, meaning you have to bet against what most people think, and you have to be right. Making a photo sharing startup at the time we did was very contrarian because there had been a ton. There had been Flickr, SmugMug, Shutterfly, you name it, like list all of them. Hipstamatic. But Hipstamatic was popular at the time.
I was on Hipstamatic.
Still is, but at the time it wasn't a nobody app. It was a big thing. People cared deeply about it. And the idea was like, well, how are you guys going to compete? Like, this is silly. Why don't I just share it on Twitter? And so it was very contrarian to go that direction. And we happened to be right. We happened to be right that some fundamental things changed. Like the phone changed everything.
I was going to ask if you were going to ride that wave, right? Because cameras now are so awesome that you have to try to take a bad photo. And then you can throw a filter on there if you still want to.
Yeah.
And it looks
I agree
great.
With you. By the way, back up for a second. Like if we imagine Instagram hadn't started and photo sharing like that vein of value hadn't been tapped, right? and someone said, "Hey, I'm going to start Instagram today," I don't think it would work. It would be, like, filters. Like, I don't know, my photos are pretty good.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know, like it's Facebook, Twitter, etc. Like it's very easy to share photos online now. I think at the time it was just the right moment of like you couldn't quite share photos on a mobile phone, and when you could, they didn't look quite right.
Right.
So we kind of jumped ahead by making them look good, and we just like jumped ahead in the future a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And good is relative. I don't know that they looked good, but
I read
we had
this.
this one filter called Little Green Men, by the way, and I
Oh.
think we cut it eventually, but it made photos look terrible. It was like green and sewagey and yeah,
Little green men.
yeah,
Here's how you make a great photo look like it has snot all over it.
yeah, it was bad.
Read the story about how you were in Mexico with your now wife, and she was saying, "Oh, I don't want to post photos because they don't look good, like so and so." And you said,
Right,
"Well, he uses a ton of filters," and she told you, "Well, then you should have filters in the app."
right.
That was the exact reason that it took me so long to get on Instagram. And my wife was like, "Why aren't you using it?" And I go, "My photos suck. You
Yeah,
tell me
yeah.
yourself they're not framed right." She's like, you can like pinch, twist,
Oh,
crop,
interesting.
and then swipe, and then it changes everything, and like
Yeah,
it makes you lose 10 pounds because you're in black and white." And I was like, she showed me. I went, "Oh my god!" And I've been on that thing every day ever since. You kind of have to hold it in your hand and see that you can actually be proud of your work. If she told me, "Hey, this makes your photos look good," I wouldn't have cared at all.
right,
But
right.
when you do it and you feel that sense of like, I actually made something work well. So if it's almost, I'm looking for this lesson in here somewhere. Like, if your app can make people feel like they're accomplishing something or doing something or creating something that they couldn't have done before, you have like one ingredient for a hit potentially.
Yeah, we talked a lot about having like one tap magic, which is okay, something. I'm going to zoom all the way back to my days at Google. I would
Okay.
play around in Photoshop with my photos. I had a nice digital camera and I took photos and everything, but I'd bring it into Photoshop and I would mess with the curves and I mess with hue and saturation. I'd overlay textures and blah, 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 right? It's not like I was the only one in the world doing it, but I was like, wow, this is cool. I like this. God, this is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
All Instagram was like that hour and a half in Photoshop in 0.5 seconds at the beginning, going down to what, 5 milliseconds towards the end. Like uh, being able to take magic and making it super easy. That was the key to Instagram. And think about it with, I don't know, things like Uber or Lyft, right? Like the idea that you don't have to call a busy, cab call center where the person puts you on hold and then says, "Wait, where are you?" And there's confusion, and then you hope that the car's on the way, but you don't really know, and then it comes, and then like, is this a good cab driver? Is it a bad cab driver? And if it's bad, you have no recourse. And if you, by the way, if you lose something in the
Oh yeah.
cab, like there's no way to get it back.
Yeah.
All of that got solved because of things like Uber and Lyft. And not to say that they're all great, but like the system got so much better. And like that's one tap magic, right? That's what I look for in companies that get started today. The hardest part is just, man, it's in terms of mobile, it's been picked over in terms of like experiences. That's not to say that things won't continue to get created, but we're kind of waiting for there to be this next platform or next big shift where all of a sudden there are a bunch of new use cases. But yeah, it's like we went from cars to scooters to bikes to like we're now getting down towards the marginal, like the incremental idea on some of these things.
Right. Yeah. And I would imagine as an investor, you see pitches that are like, it's Uber, but for dog grooming, which exists already. But I can't
Right.
think of a really dumb example off the top of my head, but you must see this all the time. And you're thinking, wow, we don't need Uber for like colored pencils.
Well,
And
I don't know. Now
Crayon.
that I have a kid, I'm like, okay, man, we need color. Well, actually, Amazon Prime is kind of that, to be
It
fair.
is. That's true.
Prime Now, I should say. Um,
Same day delivery. Yeah.
yeah, like, I often spend, I was telling you, I spend, a month or two each year outside of California, like in, nature. Not that California doesn't have nature, but I go elsewhere, right?
Right.
And the one thing that like really blows my mind when I come back is how spoiled we are with all these services, whether it's Postmates or DoorDash or, Prime Now. It's like if our baby's sick, you can just order the thing and it shows up at your door. it's all there. And when you live like, we go out to the middle of the country and it's just nothing. And you realize how far we've come in terms of building these services. It's really special. And then when you realize your little microcosm in San Francisco is small, that you actually have all of these other like places you can expand to in the US, but also in the world, you realize that tech is hit, but like not even close to the type of penetration that we're going to see over the next 20 years.
I read an article that said something about how in the early days you had so much trouble getting Instagram to work overseas because the phones couldn't process the posts, couldn't take good photos, couldn't run, I don't know, maybe they couldn't run the app as it was like the latest version of the app, and there were different versions of the app for like Southeast Asia where people are using really old phones that were 10 years ago here,
It was
5 years ago.
complicated. Yeah.
And you've got different servers that are faster. It just seems like people don't really think about that. They think, oh, well, we've got everyone's got fiber in their house now. Everyone's got broadband. So we'll just make this huge high-res file.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time early on making sure that Instagram would work on the worst phones that were out there, and that was because I owned the worst phone. And Mike and I would argue about how fast it needed to be on my clunker phone, and Mike was just like, "Will you please just buy the new iPhone 4? Like, will you please just get it?" And of course I did eventually, but I think something got lost there when I upgraded because, man, we really paid attention to speed and performance on the low end stuff. And interestingly, like, now you can basically instrument your app or your site to the point where you have tracking on just about everything.
Sure.
You can understand how fast it is for different people. That just didn't exist in the same way when we started. So we had to live it with terrible devices.
So you got
ourselves.
like your Razor or whatever, your like little flip.
No, it was the iPhone 3G. It wasn't even like the 3GS.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like the smooth curved metal back.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's like some OG.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was in the day when the iPhone 4 was available. You had the 3G.
Totally.
Yuck.
Yep.
Man. That's I hope you framed
developed
it.
for it. Yeah.
Yikes.
I don't know where it is actually. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, well,
I might have gotten rid of it a long time ago.
it's like it belongs in the Computer History Museum at this point.
That'd be cool.
I heard that you had meetings with your co-founder where you just made decisions. Like you had lists of decisions. Can you take us through that? That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah. Well, I had read this book called The Goal, and this was towards the end of Instagram, by the way. We figured this out many years into Instagram. This was not at the beginning. And after reading The Goal, it was basically about manufacturing, but it was, if you want to go read it. But the lesson is effectively like the weakest link in any quote unquote chain or manufacturing chain is the thing that will dictate the overall output of that chain. And I started thinking about that as it applies to work. And I was just like, man, people complain about X, Y, or Z like not moving. I was like, I think we're just like a giant decision factory, right? Like you just have to, like I'm definitely a decision machine, meaning like I am the thing standing in the way of things getting green lit or yellow lit or red lit.
I think we call that the bottleneck. In
Yeah,
many
thank you, the bottleneck. Like I'm definitely like I'm not sure that the decision making has to be the bottleneck, but I was thinking to myself how if decisions don't get made quickly enough, then all the other work in the organization pauses. So I had this idea where I was like, I just think we just need to inventory all the outstanding decisions, all the things we just need to blow through and list them and go one by one. And if there are hard ones, let's mark it and come back to it. And we would go through all the easy ones, then we'd narrow it down, and then we'd get to like 2 or 3 really hard ones. And sometimes they'd be related and complex, but we'd be able to have really in-depth conversations about that decision and like schedule a meeting for that decision with all the right people in the room for that decision. And that was really helpful. And, I should probably do that in my daily life now. I don't really.
I think the bottleneck now, or maybe it's just better to outsource most of the decisions. Like for me, I try to just say, Jen, if you need me for a decision, great, but if you don't, just do it. Yeah. And then I can sort of like secretly get a little annoyed later, but it's never worth it. It's always just better to have it done.
Yeah, I struggle with this because on the one hand, I really like being involved in things. I really like having control, and on the other hand, I like things getting done.
Oh man!
So it's a balance. But listen, I started a company and we're, years later and I'm still working on it. So I guess what I'm saying is, like I hope to meet people that are great at this and maybe start companies with them.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Sometimes I think our nature just takes over. It's like, look, I'm never going to be that much better. The odds of you going, you know what, I don't need to be in control of everything. That will be either something that never goes away, or when your daughter is a teenager, you'll just be
Yeah.
like, I am now powerless and I have to accept that.
It's all good.
Yeah. Early on, you guys were struggling to scale. I know the server was down and you had this alarm going off. You have like PTSD from this ringer
I
or
do,
whatever
yeah.
from your phone.
Yeah, I never want to hear it again.
I,
Yeah.
I can imagine. There were other competitors at the same time that had tens of millions in funding, that had all their infrastructure built out. How come they didn't crush you guys?
Well, so a couple things. One, those companies were failing too, meaning I remember giant outages of Foursquare or the fail whale on Twitter,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like, it's not like we were the only ones struggling to keep our infrastructure running. I mean, it's kind of like a science now, and you can find really good people. But back then, I think it was a lot harder because a lot of this stuff was just brand new. Why didn't they just kill us? I mean, one, we were doing very different things. I mean, let's take Twitter, for instance. Like, Twitter's just a very different product than Instagram. And while there's some overlap in use case and people have limited time in the day, sure, they're not the same. So I think the more important question is like, okay, why didn't companies pivot into doing what we were doing if they were big? And then why didn't other small companies win better than us? Those are the two
Hmm.
categories. In terms of the small companies, I don't know. I mean, was it luck? Was it talent? Was it a combination of both? I don't know those other companies. I mean, I know their names, but I don't know how they ran. I don't like, I can't diagnose that. But all I
Hmm.
can say is like, we worked hard and we tried and we had enough at bats and we hit one grand slam, right? Like, that's all you got to do in life, one grand slam. So have as many at bats as possible. In terms of the big companies, I think it's classic innovator's dilemma where big companies, they first write you off because they think you're a gimmick. And then eventually they start seeing that, oh, wait, like there's an actual use case there. But it's really hard for them to pivot because of something they hold dear. And now I'm not in the boardroom or in the product development process for these larger companies like Facebook or Twitter. But I'd imagine it's just like, in order to do that thing that other company is doing, we need to shift something fundamental. So take like, for instance, the follow graph of Instagram. Like it's very like Facebook ended up having it, but it didn't really work the same
What
way.
is this again?
The follow graph,
What does that even
where you
mean?
get instead of you and I having to be friends to see each other's content, I can just follow you, and you don't have to follow
Oh,
me
follow
back.
graph. Okay, I thought it was like
Asymmetric
some.
follow graph. Yeah.
Got it. I thought this was like some sort of fancy word that started with a PH
No. Follow
or
space
PF.
graph. I
Got it.
apologize. Asymmetric following, meaning
Okay.
we don't have to be friends. Non-friend relationships,
Right,
right?
like broadcasting
Yeah,
in a way.
basically, right? My point is, it's very hard to pivot to that if your whole company, like not even like just your ethos, but like your infrastructure is based on friends. Then you gotta like design this other thing, and now they both exist together. And it's like, wait, am I friends with you or am I following you? Right? Like
Yeah.
it's hard. So I mean, this is true with Instagram too. I mean, when we decided we were going to compete in the Snapchat world and like work on stories, most of our effort was not figuring out how to build stories because I don't know, the like product was there, you could see it. It was how does this thing fit in nicely and neatly with the existing system and not crush the, and that's really hard.
It is hard.
But I think we pulled that off fairly well. And that's why it ended up working.
Yeah, I love that.
Like that's competing well as a big company.
As
The
much
biggest relative because
that
we're small.
That's true. I guess you were really agile. I look at the stats and it was like Twitter had like multiples of the number of employees that you guys had. What do you have, like 11? And they had like 300, 450 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you look at Snapchat had multiples of whatever you
But
had.
this is a benefit.
It is a benefit.
I'm working on ideas now, and I'm just like, man, but we don't have a lot of people, so like, how are we going to do that? Like, and often the thing I have to remind myself is sometimes not being from an industry, and sometimes being able to move really quickly is in fact your advantage. Not always, but often, especially if you get into a disruptive like area that feels new and weird. If you're playing in existing spaces, I think it's a lot easier to just get crushed by big players. But if you're trying something new, it takes a lot of time to steer the Titanic away from an iceberg, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd really, looking back now, I just couldn't do it. I'm 39. Like I'm like too. There's a part of me that's like I'm too old for this, right? I couldn't do.
No one's
I
ever too old for anything. That's what I've
It's
found.
true, but it's also like it's hard to wrap your mind around starting over. Although if you have to do it, you'll figure it out most likely.
Yeah.
When did you finally realize you guys had something? Was it like
Day one.
really?
Yeah, it was really clear to me. Like people just started signing up. I'd never seen anything like it. I knew people with startups, and like no one saw the volume we saw on day one. I was like, this is like an instant hit with people, and like I didn't have data that showed they were retaining, so it was definitely overconfidence. Trust me,
Mhm.
like I didn't really know. But day one, I was like, this is different and something's new and something's weird. And like, we've created something I'm not entirely sure at what scale, but this thing it's meaningful.
Did you have 25,000 downloads the first day,
Not downloads,
or
signups.
signups? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Which
probably more downloads. Yeah.
which is mind blowing because it's like, how do you even get? If I downloaded that at 12:01 a.m. in the beginning of the day, and I texted everyone in my phone book that they had to wake their ass up and get this app and
Right.
sign up for an
Yeah.
account, it would be hard to get that many
I agree.
in one day.
I agree.
And you did it.
Companies struggle with that. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that was a special time.
Did you ever think, oh God, this is too good to be true? I'm gonna wake up one day and it's like, oh, that it's over.
No.
You don't have that kind of anxiety.
No. In fact, I worried more that, oh God, we're screwing it up. Like, oh God, like we're down again. Everyone's gonna leave. They're gonna think we're terrible. Like, I had more of those feelings than like we're a flash in the pan. And I don't know if that was just like, you know, naivete or
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it. Like, it might have been, but no, it's interesting. Like when working on the startup, I just never had a feeling we were going to fail. Not that we were going to be successful, just I never like once we launched, it was like, no, this thing's going to work. Like I'm not sure exactly at what scale, but people like it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Were you
Probably
ever?
should have been a little bit more worried, but
Yeah. Would that have served you at all? I don't know. It seems like it would. Great. So you get less sleep. I mean, what's the point?
yeah, we didn't have time to worry.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would that have done? Like, hey, don't get excited. Don't all that passion that's keeping you through all these hard times. Get rid of that because we want to temper your expectations. Like, there's no room for that, really.
I think things are either positive feedback loops or negative feedback
Yeah.
loops. Like, what's the phrase? Like, you're either living or you're dying. Like, you're either like growing and this thing's a positive feedback loop and it's spreading and people are retaining and it's good, or it's a leaky bucket, in which case that's pretty clear pretty quickly. It's rare that it's somewhere in the middle and you can't tell. Um, so I just like it was growing and then the question was like, how do we not screw this thing up?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you stayed for 6 years even after the acquisition. I looked at other companies and how long the founders stay, and it's like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, sometime. I think one guy.
I think the PayPal founders, like Peter Thiel, I think left the day after the acquisition
It's
or
like,
something.
peace. I'm rich.
No,
That's
it's
funny.
I don't know. Listen, I don't know him, and I don't know their like reasons for staying or leaving. That's not my point, actually. I think the YouTube founders were there for a while. Yeah, we were in like 3 standard deviations out. Beyond. I think I haven't done a study. I guess I could now with all the time,
Yeah,
but
sure.
not gonna. Um, People often ask why. The answer is really simple. I had the coolest job in the entire world.
Mhm.
Like running Instagram, I still think like that period of time at Instagram was, I don't know, if you love what I love, which is social media, creating something that people use, creativity, creating an awesome brand, blah, 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 right? That was the coolest job to have for those 6 years. I couldn't think of anything else in the entire world I'd rather be doing. And yeah, it's like it was an epic, epic ride.
I know that you can't talk about why you resigned as CEO, and I wouldn't ask, but I would
But
imagine.
I'm about to.
No, I'm really not,
I'm
actually.
joking.
No, yeah. I would love to, but I know the answer is, hey, didn't we talk about not talking about that?
No,
Um,
I never talked to you about not talking about that. I'm fine to say I think everything has an expiration date. Like, no one stays doing everything forever. With life, I think goals change too, which is like, you want to work on other things. I, you know, I once, I'm not going to name the person, but I once talked to a very famous musician who's like in a very, very famous band. Think like not modern band, but like 70s. Okay.
Hmm.
And they were just crushing it. And this person was on the top of their game. And like all they wanted to do was talk about their new musical projects, not that thing in the past. And I think even people at the pinnacle there, and I'm not saying we were like that band or anything,
Hmm.
but like I realized there's just a certain amount of like you're a person and there's new stuff out there and you want to do new things. And when priorities change at the company internally, it's just like it shows that even more clearly.
How was Paul McCartney in person?
I've never met Paul
Oh, okay.
McCartney,
It was a
unfortunately.
decent guess, though. I think.
Yeah.
Um, I would just have trouble staying, knowing that I've got this, all these resources now, and being like, my wife wants to have more kids, and I can go skiing every single day. Like, going and doing something for a while would start. There's like a limited, very finite amount of patience I would have for like finding parking at the Facebook building and like waiting in Palo Alto traffic. I'd be like, okay,
I once tried to
I
get
know.
in my building, and the security guard asked if I was there for an interview, and I was like, "No, I run it."
Yeah,
And
your own building.
yeah, it was a bit surreal, but we became good friends after. He was a very nice security guard.
He was just doing his
He
job, I
was
guess.
just doing his job, but I guess I looked professional. I get maybe I was wearing a tie that day or something. I don't know. Used to wear ties. That was a weird period of life.
Yeah.
But no, I actually think that's one of the more dangerous things about having any amount of money at all is just like becoming what's the word I want to use here? Like intolerant of some of the harder things of life, like waiting, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous, and I think you have to live as normal life as you possibly can, no matter what your level of success. You have to like face that life isn't easy. It's not handed to you. That doesn't mean you shouldn't like optimize the crap out of it. You should,
Yeah.
but it's like staying normal is half the game.
How do you keep yourself in check then? Do you have a process where you're like, wait, am I really getting this bent out of shape about this? Or,
I think the second you ask yourself, like, am I in check? You're like one of the good ones. Like,
oh,
you
okay,
know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, no one who like has to ask themselves that. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it totally does. It's like the Hollywood thing. Like, am I being a dick? No, because the fact that you ask that means
Yeah.
you're at least like one toe is still in the ground. It's the
Yeah.
guy who goes ballistic at the check-in clerk.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I think everyone has blind spots, and maybe I don't see stuff, but I think like, um, I think it's almost good not to be at the company anymore and running it anymore because it allows you to see one, like who are your friends who were like there because they're actually your friends, and then who are all the people that just liked the fact that you had a title or a position or they
Mm.
wanted something out of you, or and it's been great to realize how many people are actually there because they like you, but also to stay grounded because you're like, yeah, like you can't get anything, you can't get verified anymore by bugging.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
and how many people have stopped bugging you for a blue check mark?
Unfortunately, not many. I still get
They still
messages
do
every
it.
day, and I'm like, I don't work there. I'm sorry.
Like, I have as much power as you do now, buddy. Apply. Here's the
I mean, I
link.
know people, but
Yeah, you don't
I
have
should
to.
be careful.
Yeah, you don't have to let that bit of knowledge go.
Yeah.
Is there anything that
Also, like everyone's verified now.
I had noticed that. I look and I'm like, oh, what does this person do? Wait, they're the
It says
or blogger.
influencer or something,
Yeah,
or
it says
blogger,
influencer.
and I'm like, oh, okay. Well,
I mean, I'm like one standard deviation to the left of that, but yeah,
it's fine. Like it is what it is.
it's all right. The check mark has lost all meaning. Maybe. Is there anything that you did look at when you finally got the payout where you're like, I'm finally gonna buy this? I always wonder, like when I talk to like rock stars, I'm like, what was the first thing you bought? And it's always laundry.
Yeah, because I was living in an apartment, didn't have a laundry machine, and we had to like lug everything like 3 blocks. And by the way, San Francisco, for those listening that don't live in San Francisco, very few people realize that summer here is winter, and it's just like it's rainy, and we'd have to, and it's fun. Like it's character building. You go
Mhm.
off on the weekend, and my girlfriend at the time, now wife, just lug all our stuff down. But the first thing was like, we're getting 2 laundry machines.
Like, now that I
Because if
have
one breaks down, it's like you want to be able to do darks and whites,
at the
you know?
same
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Cut your time in half. But that, no, you think I'm joking, but that was like, we ended up looking for a place to live in the same area we were before. But like, I remember the real estate agent being like, and it has 2 washers and dryers. And we just like, our jaws were on the floor. It
Yeah.
was,
Give me that. Where do I
I
sign?
guess I'm a simple person in some way. I don't know. Like,
That
I
makes
wish
sense,
it
though.
was like I could say like, oh, a Gulfstream, but no, not even that.
Yeah, I was like, did you price islands? And then they're like, dang, these things are really expensive.
No, it was like, man, how great would it be to have 2 washers and dryers?
It-
It sounds silly, but
it-
it's like amazing.
yeah. Well, I'm doing laundry on the West Wing now because
Yeah.
I'm watching TV in here and I don't want to hear the buzzer. Yeah. That's do you have FOMO now at all? Like Instagram is sort of intimately associated with FOMO, right? I didn't even know what that word
Mm.
that term was before people started using it. And I'm wondering if it's affected you at all.
Yeah, but not in the way you'd expect. Like, we just had a kid, so we
Yeah.
have I don't know, I guess 7 weeks at this point.
Wow.
I'd have to go and count it. It feels like it changes too quickly. But basically that meant that over the holidays, everyone was like doing their amazing holiday trips and everyone's everywhere. And we were like inside with
Yeah,
the
not
screaming
going
baby. It's raining. Like, you know, we're going nowhere. So there was a little bit of FOMO. So I was like, okay, Nicole, like, let's just delay the holidays. We still celebrated everything, but let's just like take our holiday vacation once we can. So we went last week and we did the Hawaii thing. And it was great. And by the way, more people should do this because like no
No
one's
one's
there.
there. Everything's cheaper.
Everything's cheaper. Everything's great. Like no one's there. You have the whole place to yourself. I can't remember what the question was, but I told an interesting
It was, do you
story.
still get FOMO?
Oh, do I still get FOMO?
Yeah.
So yeah, there was that a little bit. But no, I feel like I've done like I've been to the Oscars. I've done the Grand. It's all super fun and it's really interesting. But like you do it once and you're just like, okay, like start to really like hanging out with your family. And I now think about like what really interesting places on earth do I want to travel? And, you know, with little kids, you're just a little bit more restricted. So my list is growing. Let's just put it that way.
Are there places you feel like you can't go because you're too high profile? I know that sounds kind of ridiculous because you're like, what? I found it in an app, you know? But
No, it's actually, again, like not running the thing. Like we'd have these moments where, like, I don't know, I'd like be on the cover of some magazine and there'd be like a month where I would walk into a place and people would like, I don't know, point or like you could just tell when you walk in, they get quiet and they're like talking to their friend on
it's
the
the
phone.
founder of Instagram.
But now that doesn't happen anymore. I feel so nice. And I'm so thankful that podcasts don't, you know, have visuals. Or I guess we have visuals.
Except for all these cameras. Ignore the cameras and the
joking.
lighting.
But no, I think one of the most amazing things is to be able to create something with a team, not alone, with a team that's really special in the world. But also to be able to have your personal freedom and like just go out to eat and not be bothered. And because I know that's not the case for a lot of people.
That's true. Yeah. Although it's hard for a lot of people to feel bad for those people because they go, oh, wow, you're rich and famous. It must be so hard. But I would imagine it's a huge pain. We were talking before, my videographer, Nathaniel and I were talking before this, and we were like, he's like, all right, I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, but if you're that rich, wouldn't you want to fake your own death just so you could live a normal life? And I'm like, I don't think it works that way, but it's not like...
That was the briefing for this?
That was the briefing for this. Like, do you think Kevin will eventually fake his own death until he can live a normal life?
No. I don't know what a normal life is first.
Right.
Meaning I don't think anyone does. Everyone thinks like, I think I live a pretty normal life. But the second thing is, I don't know, you just got to be your own person. Love what you love. And I mean... Do the things that bring you passion and be kind of like, you know, don't apologize for it.
On a serious note, though, you've built some like serious generational wealth, which is awesome. I wonder, has this added pressure to your life in some way? Because now you've got to, I put "gotta" in air quotes here. It's like you have to do something very grand or it's like a waste, you know? And I don't know if this is, again, not my opinion, but there's a whole body of people like that Bill Gates is saying things like, if you die wealthy, you've failed. I don't know if is it Bill Gates or Warren Buffett? Somebody said, if you die wealthy, you've failed. And it's like, give away all your money at the end of the day, start some crazy charity and make some sort of world changing thing happen. And you see it a lot. You see a
Yeah.
lot of people doing this. Do you
Yeah.
feel that added stress
The
of
stress
any kind?
I feel, well, first off, okay, so I don't want to jinx myself. I'm 36, so I still think I have some time
Tons of
left.
time.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the people you're quoting are not 36. So I think they're thinking about other things. The thing I think mostly about is the big pressure is, what do I want to do with the other 36 years or
Right.
60 years maybe? That's way harder than like signing a paper that says when I die, all this goes to some foundation. Like
Oh,
that's
that's the
easy,
easy
actually.
way out. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's easy. So I think having impact in the world while you're still living is the hardest thing to figure out, especially when you've had
Yeah.
something like Instagram was chapter 1, right?
That's my question.
It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, there's this hot dog stand I've always been dreaming about and it's got like a really good recipe. No, I think that's way harder. And it's way harder to be a beginner again at stuff. Like when I left Instagram, I decided that I didn't want to work on tech, but I wanted to learn something and I wanted to work my brain hard. So I learned to fly. It was like a dream of mine. It was on
Mhm.
a list. And I looked at the list and I was like, yeah, that's the thing, because that's going to be hard. And what I learned was, man, like everything's hard, whether it's super impactful or not. Like learning to fly was just as hard as learning to program. But like learning to program for me, like allowed me to create things for other people that then hopefully improve their lives in some way. And learning to fly was really fun because I don't know, it's a cool hobby, but like I can't create an Instagram out of learning to fly, if that makes
It's not very
sense.
scalable.
No, I mean, there are lots of people that there are some cool companies working in the flying space right now. Meaning like personal transports and stuff with like electric vertical takeoff and landing. It's super cool,
That stuff
actually.
is cool.
But you actually don't need to be a pilot to like start that company. Anyway, um, backing up, I'll say figuring out what to do with your time to make a meaningful impact in the world. That's super interesting and tough. But I the one thing that I think people forget is we all live life day to day, and it feels like every second is a minute, right?
Hmm.
Like you got to figure out what to do for this podcast, and you got to figure out this other thing, and then you got to get home, and your kids got to go to sleep, and it feels like a giant day, and that is a fraction of your life, and that like maybe great ideas take a year, or maybe they take 5 years, or maybe they take 10 years to germinate. You'd never really know. And you have to kind of be patient. And I think that's what I'm learning through this process is that, like, I want to spend my time doing really fun stuff that I love that's hard. So it's going to have some not so fun stuff
Hmm.
involved. But it's got to be an area I care deeply about. And hopefully it impacts more than like just me, right? It impacts a lot of people. But Instagram was a good one. And if that's the only one I ever have, then so be it.
Yeah, you can always like be like the troop leader for your
It's
kids
fine.
or
I
something.
think troop leaders are like, yeah,
It's
it's a big
super
deal.
important.
Yeah.
People don't really realize
I'm
that.
definitely going to coach soccer at some point, for
Yeah,
sure.
you gotta be that like just. There's some bad soccer dads. You gotta
Okay,
gotta
I
keep
gotta
it
be.
together.
Yeah, I'll read a book first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's. I know that's your thing. I'm gonna
Yeah.
after the show, I'll go over your book reading
Okay.
strategy. I
Fair.
didn't want to ask you about it because it's kind of out there
Okay,
already.
that's fair.
I will go over it because you do have a. You're the only person I know who reads books about how to read books.
Yeah. Well, there's only one book that's about how to read books, from what I know. But yes, it was meta.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, very much so. Was there a part of you that maybe left a little bit of your identity in Instagram? I know leaving a company sometimes
Yeah.
it's like, well, crap, who am I without being this person, like the CEO? You're still the founder. Nobody can take that away from you. But if you're not doing that day to day to day, it's like, well, oh crap, I have like this little identity crisis. Like I get up in the morning and I'm not sure if am I the same person? I had that when I started a new company. And it was kind of this weird, surreal experience that I
Yeah.
didn't expect.
Yeah. No. No. The answer is yes and no, but like, let me explain. I think I may be wrong here, but I think 95% of it is being the co-founder of Instagram. That will remain true for the rest of my life. We had a great run. We created something really special. We grew it to a massive size. People were very, I think, happy with it where we left it. And like 5% of it was this like temporary. You happen to have this title. You happen to like be able to hire people. Like you're
Hmm.
right. Like that is far less important than thinking back on the memory of the time that we spent building it into what it is today. Um, and at least that's my mental framework for it. Um, it is freeing to say now, okay, but now I can do anything. Like you could start a different company in social media, or you could decide social media is never for me and I'm going to go work in, I don't know, philanthropy or
Hmm.
politics or something. Like I'm just going to do something completely different. And that's really interesting. And when you realize that you're one of few people who gets to have a chapter two, right? Like a lot of
Yeah.
people don't, that you feel really like super grateful for that.
I would imagine it's hard for somebody as competitive as you to slow down.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. My wife, my wife pokes fun at me. I don't go at things, in cruise control. It's definitely either full throttle or nothing at all.
yeah, I mean, we were just talking about reading a book to learn how to read books better. So you don't seem like the kind of guy's like, I'm just gonna wing this one.
But I'm not like, see, there's a difference between being competitive and being challenge oriented. I don't think I'm super competitive, meaning like I don't wake up in the morning trying to crush other people. Like that's not
Hmm.
but I do wake up in the mornings thinking like, okay, if my fastest mile time was X, how can I get it down 30 seconds? What are all the crazy ways to get there? And that's really fun for me.
That's healthier though, because that's you versus yourself. Whereas I think your previous example was kind of you versus the world,
Yeah.
which might be a little bit unhealthy.
Yeah, but it can be challenging at times because sometimes you wake up and like I was like really hard on myself about the flying thing because I was like, I got to be good at this. I got my license in like 3 months, and that's like a really short amount of time.
Yeah, it's a little
And
scary.
well, no, it's like I had more hours than you usually
Sure.
have. In fact, like it's fine. But I was like frustrated it took so long. And someone was like, dude, like most people take like a year to like chill
Hmm.
out. Like, and sometimes you forget that in the process. You forget to like maybe cut yourself a little
Sure.
slack at it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I think it's important to, sometimes we would be really, I'll give you an example as it relates to Instagram. We were really hard on ourselves about things going wrong at the company or, just like how we were running it or mistakes we had made. But then we'd like go meet with other companies who will remain nameless. And they'd ask for advice, and we would be like, well, this, and this. And you'd realize really quickly, actually, like, as broken as some things were at the company,
Hmm.
you were still operating like maybe a good head and shoulders above some other people. Not everyone. There are some really great companies out there. But I think that when your yardstick is your own, you can forget that the yardstick's really big.
That's true, right? You're kind of losing sight of, hey, we're in the 99th
I'm waiting for
percentile.
that to become a T-shirt.
What's
Like
that?
when your yardstick's
Or
are on, that doesn't make any
it
sense.
sounds
Sorry,
it's a good
everyone.
bumper
Yeah,
sticker,
it's okay.
or the worst bumper sticker. You have kids now, as we talked about before. Do you feel like what? How do you feel about their use of social media? I mean, look, I think your kid's 7 weeks old.
I love
Probably
this
doesn't.
question because I'm like, it's easy. They're really young and they
Yeah,
don't use social media. And by the time they're old enough to use social media, it's going to be a completely different thing.
totally. Yeah,
Why don't I answer this? I'm artfully
yeah.
doing the,
This
the
is great.
thing, right?
I expected you to do
Exactly.
this.
Thank you. Let's talk about their use of technology. It starts simple, right? Like my daughter loves to color. She loves to color, but the markers get everywhere and it's all over a rug, right? And so I figured out that there are these digital tablets where literally you just color all you want and then press a button and it clears the page. And she loves it. I'm like, isn't this such a better solution than markers all over the rug? And then I'm just thinking, my experience with technology as a kid was that it was a good thing. It was a fun way to explore what you could build. And I think treating technology as this like soul sucking, windowless world, like that's really sad. That's a really pessimistic view of technology. I think it's all in what are the experiences we give our kids when they're using technology. So, are we letting them watch, vapid cartoons, or like are we allowing them to, my daughter loves hippos. I don't know why. She's obsessed with them.
I mean, kids love hippos
Right?
generally.
But like she's like especially excited about hippos. And we were watching videos of hippos at different zoos, and we spent a bunch of time, and she was asking questions, and like that's such an important experience. My point is technology can enable important experiences like that. I guess if watching hippos is important,
I
but
think that, yeah, I
you
totally
know what I mean.
understand that. Yeah.
And it's not a black or white issue. I think it's like, it's in your control how these things get used.
If you, what do you think about like TikTok and the fact that that's, owned by the Chinese Communist Party and all this stuff? Like, would you let your kids use something like that if they were old enough?
Uh,
That's kind of a sticky wicket.
yeah, that's a really good question. I honestly, I don't know enough to answer that question. I think like it's not really relevant because I'm not sure. Listen, I'm sure TikTok's great, and I'm sure all these apps, Instagram, Facebook, etc. I will be happy if Instagram is still around and kicking when my daughter is of the age to use it.
Mhm.
Like that would be a good thing, and I think unprecedented in terms of social media.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. It looks like you stopped using Instagram, and then I was like, Googled it, and it's like, oh, you
Yeah.
deleted all his posts. Like, what is that a thing you can talk about, or is it just like you just stopped using it?
No, no,
Yeah.
no, no. I use Instagram more than any app, I think. Yeah, other than maybe email. No, I use Instagram the most. I browse Instagram a lot. That doesn't mean I post. I went back to my profile and I just decided I wanted my profile to represent me and my family and what I did in life. So I just got rid of a bunch of like the more, hey, I'm the CEO and I'm doing a PSA on this thing posts
Mm,
because I felt like it wasn't representative of what I was doing now. Um, but it wasn't like, yeah, I don't know. People like to like watch things and read into things,
yeah, I've
but
read that. Yeah,
I'm not posting on Instagram right now, mostly just because like I think when you're not in it, you just want to take a step back and be able to do whatever you want, not feel like you got to post about it with a hashtag that's clever. And like I love that people love using Instagram and
yeah.
posting to it. It's great.
I
But I'm just in more of maybe a private period where that's not as much for me, but I'm happy to share it.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Then we'll leave it in because
Yeah.
people were wondering. I thought maybe you deleted the one with your plane because it's like, well, if they have that number, they can like see where I'm at, and that's kind of weird. It's kind of like
No.
because they can track your
Well, two
plane.
things. One, that's not my plane. That
Well,
was a
good to know.
rental. Yeah. And two, you can block those numbers. So,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
it's all good.
What do you think are the responsibilities of a platform in terms of free speech and moderating comments and content? Because you guys were great at like knocking out bullying. There's
Yeah.
how many people have used Instagram and they're like, I had an awful experience there. Maybe younger people, but as adults, you can go on Twitter now, guaranteed 1 out of 100 experiences, you're gonna have some craziness.
Hmm.
Instagram, I can't even remember the last time somebody did something where I wasn't just like, crazy person, block, and done.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's a delicate question because one, I'm no longer in a seat in
Sure.
which I'm able to like, in order to, able to affect it. Um, I can still have opinions and I can probably, sway things here or there, but let me put it this way, it's delicate. And I think the reason it's delicate is because you have to decide who is to blame. Is it the maker, the hoster, or the doer? And I think at the end of the day, the doer, it's like absolutely. If trying to think of a good example. Like, are you also going to hold Apple accountable for what people do on their computers, right?
Hmm.
Like, okay, like some people might say absolutely, and some people might say that sounds crazy.
Hmm.
But there's like a line, right? Like, what about the chipset manufacturers? Like, are they liable? Like, is it just the services? Is it certain teams at the services? Is it the executive? And I think that people should be responsible for their own behavior first and foremost. I think there should be laws
Yeah.
governing that. And I think we should probably be more strict about it, right? That gets complicated because these services are multinational. So you're running, your rules in Brazil are different than your rules in the US are different than your rules in Europe. And you have to figure out all these rule sets. So my point is it's complicated to run. But holding services accountable for the content is where it gets tricky because that content was created by people, not
Right.
the service. And those services are now running at a scale where it's not like you can go through every Instagram post before it gets posted and say, and by the way, they do in certain services, like, there are certain services in China where when people post and it has to go through a vetting process and it gets reviewed by human reviewers. But like, so far as a society, at least in the United States, we have made the decision that that is not the balance
Mhm.
we want. So I guess my more political answer would just be, I think we have to decide as a society where we want that line between freedom of expression and that fluidity of posting and like the beautiful things that happen because of these services. Do we want that to exist in its current form? Or do we believe the costs associated with people saying or doing whatever they want online are too great? So we should put more onus on the companies that host them, even if their ability to police it's really difficult at scale. I mean, if you have,
I
I don't know,
can't
2
imagine
point
how you.
whatever billion people posting every single day, and
Yeah.
I'm not making excuses. I'm just
No, I
saying,
don't take it that way at all. I don't
yeah.
know how
But
the
for
heck you could
everyone
police it.
listening, like, it's not about making excuses. It's just I think we as society have to decide, where do you want that line, because there is a trade-off.
Mhm.
And we can decide we want everything to be reviewed and we want everything seen before it goes out, and that'll, I think, just like on the scale of, like, free creativity, meaning free expression and creativity, towards total censorship. I think generally the United States has fallen more on free expression and creativity and freedom of speech. um, but of course this gets very complicated in certain instances, and I don't know, like, I'm not in the seat to make that decision
Of
right now.
course. You're probably glad that you're not in the seat to make that decision. I don't know if I could handle that kind of responsibility.
I don't know. I think it's super important for the world, and I think anyone who makes those types of decisions has to take it super seriously, and I hope they make the right ones.
What do you think about the candidates that are like, we got to break up big tech?
Hmm.
I assume, I mean, well, this is tough because you're a shareholder of a big tech company. But aside from that, it's still, to me, let me go first. It still seems like a weird, bad idea that doesn't have to happen. But I'm curious what you think.
I believe that people don't quite understand the problem that they're trying to solve.
Mhm.
I think that in general, tech has been villainized for being big, and I think that's problematic, because I think one of the things about this the society here in the U.S. is that we can create companies that scale to billions of people, and that's rewarded, and that's isn't that exciting that that's happening here,
Mhm.
not overseas, not anywhere else, like here. And it's people that go to college and, a year later they're creating massive value in the world that changes all of our lives. It's not like people hate these services. I mean, they use them every day,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so being big doesn't feel like a crime itself. And that's what strikes me as hard, to just say break them all up. That doesn't feel right, because it's like, okay, if you could point at what you're solving by doing that, is it, creating more competition in advertising? Is it creating more freedom for consumers to choose? What is it that you're trying to do? I think I'd be more excited to entertain those ideas. But when it feels like just, an indictment of all tech, that just shows me that the critical thinking hasn't happened. And then it worries me more that we're playing with, a political agenda than we are solving real problems, which is what I think we want our representatives to do.
Sure.
Um, but like everything, people say, build the wall, and then it's not clear the wall gets built. So we'll see how much of this becomes a reality. And at the end of the day, all I hope is that it reflects the wants and the desires and the will of the people that elect these folks. If that's true, then we're in a good space.
That's a really good answer. Did you wing that or have you answered this before?
I don't do many questions about this.
That
Yeah.
was no, that was a great answer. I don't think I'm impressed by that answer. That really happens. Um,
Thank you.
so you
Well, it's
wanted
true though.
it
Like,
is
I
true.
mean,
Yeah, I agree with
people
it.
forget that
100%.
you, like, elect people to carry out the will of the people. And
Yeah.
and if everyone in the United States is like, we want to break up tech because it's the right thing, then maybe it's the right thing to do. But I don't think that's what most people think.
No, I think to me it seems like it's a good sort of way to say, hey, look, we're gonna punch that big tall guy in the face. That's what people want to do. Yeah, you screw big tech. They're not like, hey, if we break these up, then they won't sell our data in these harmful ways. No, we're just going to have 30 smaller companies that sell our data in whatever way they want. It'll be harder to regulate, if anything else.
Well, I'll tell you, maybe a closing thought on this is that I think, wealth disparity has a fair amount to do with this.
Mhm.
And if, there are people who have done studies on populism throughout time, and I've read these things, and it's pretty striking the themes that come about, that when wealth disparity increases and populism increases, you tend to get these radical views of making big changes, and sometimes that leads to productive outcomes. I just really hope in the current situation that we can find a way to keep the amazing value that's been created by some of these companies. Think about like all the value Amazon brings to people's lives, or Google, or like I want to make sure that America remains the center of that type of innovation, and that's rewarded, and that we have all the right checks and balances to make sure that, with great power comes great responsibility. But man, to squander that would just be like a sad day in history for the United States, right?
I think so. So, I know you don't know what you're going to do next, but are we thinking more along the lines of new technology, new app, or are we thinking more along the lines of like full Tony Stark?
And with that, I will decline to answer. It
Thank
was
you
so
very
much fun.
much.
Thank
This is
you.
fun.
Yeah, thanks.
If you liked this interview, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show podcast. Lots more just like it. Or click here for Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, or right here for Steve Elkins, who found a lost city in the jungle.